event. We've been working with the guys from Hitchhikers for the last probably 18 months to come up with these events. It's taken us a bit of time to open the boutique, so this is the first one. We're looking at doing another 2 this year. The dates are on Hitchhikers, but when they come close to time we'll be posting some more posts on Hitchhikers. Tonight we're going to concentrate on the Special Edition Loudspeakers. We've got Richard Hollinshead from Meridian, who's the Director of Engineering, to talk through a quick presentation, which will be about 30 minutes. Then we're going to do a question and answer session. So if you've got a question to ask Richard, stick up your hand, and then we'll go through some questions. Then what we'll do, we'll stop for something to eat. There's some sandwiches, some drinks, if Russell hasn't drunk all the wine and the beer. And then what we'll do, we'll split everyone up into nice groups where we can go into the cinema room and listen to our 7200 SEs with Richard. Richard's got some of his own music, and that will probably be maybe a bit more of a personal one-to-one if you want to ask Richard some questions about it. They're going to last about 10 minutes each, because looking at the numbers, we might need to split that into 3 or 4 groups. So if that's okay, we'll do it 10 minutes. Everyone else can be here. We've also got the top of the range, or one of the top of the range Range Rovers out the back. It's the 4.4 litre diesel with the full 3D Meridian surround sound system in. And if you haven't heard that already, I'd recommend just grabbing one of us and to take you around there to look at it. I'll quickly introduce you to some of the Meridian staff, just in case you don't know. Obviously we've got Richard Hollinshead, Director of Engineering. We've got John, who's the Executive Vice President of Consumer Products. I got that right. We've got Paul, Wayne and Chris. Paul's the National Sales Manager, and Chris is the Sales Consultant for the UK. And we've got Katie and Alex, who are the marketing team. So if you have any other questions tonight as well, we've got plenty of people from Meridian to answer them questions. From Meridian West London, you've got myself, Rob, and Ian. We're the directors of Meridian West London, and we've got Ed, who works for us as well, who has got a big knowledge of Meridian. He spent 15 years with Meridian.
Saint Ed.
And now he's with... Thank you. The idea is we're going to video the whole session with Richard, and then with some of the sessions in there. So for people who couldn't come, we're going to put them onto the Unplugged site, and also we've got Arte, who's taken some images that we will post on there as well. So have a great evening. Feel free to talk to anyone at Meridian or any of us. Enjoy the evening, and I'll hand you over to Richard Hollinshead.
There's seats just over here.
Welcome, and thank you for coming along. So we're here to talk about our Special Edition Loudspeakers, but I want to start off with this slide, because if we think about what a loudspeaker does, what the point of it is, why do you have one? It's really to transport you to somewhere else, to a different space and to a different time. This happens to be the Tonhalle in Düsseldorf, Germany. So the idea is that if you are listening to the loudspeakers, you could be moved to somewhere like that. Experience what happens there and then. Unfortunately, unlike the Victorians, we do not have time machines. This one's from 1960 apparently, but I was born a little later than that, and I have never seen one. So we have to put up with things that look like this, a nice LS35A, or maybe a pair of Beats headphones, whatever it is that we have, to try and do that job. And it's quite an extraordinary idea that we might be able to get away with that, really, to be able to transport you back in time to a concert hall, to a sports event, perhaps somewhere across the city, perhaps even into a virtual world that's been created inside a game, or perhaps something that was in the mind of a director when he made a movie. Quite extraordinary idea that these little things would be able to reconstruct all of the sound we need to be there. And in reality, at one level they can't do it. You are never going to be completely deceived. Virtual reality is a kind of damp squib. You're always going to know when you're listening to music at home that you're at home. You're not going to be confused that you're in the concert hall. But there is something essential that happens in the concert hall, at the gig, wherever it may be, that is about human-to-human communication. when I went to the Tonhalle, I went not to see the empty room we just saw, but to see Julia Fischer play. And what she did was go there to play to people like me. So there was this human-to-human communication. And that is both extremely beneficial because it says there's an essence there that we can transmit, and troublesome because we have to understand what that is. And my job as an audio engineer is to work out what it is that needs to be transmitted from there and then to here and now so that you can experience the music. And we have this is one of our older advertisements or slogans, listen closely. And I put that up because it is all about hearing and listening. It is about the human aspect of it. It's not about just what we can do technically with the vibrations of air in the room. It's about doing something that communicates with you, the listener, with me, the listener. I'm enjoying marketing slogans tonight. This is one of the latest ones. But sometimes they're meaningful. Sometimes the guys that work there, sometimes, just sometimes, sometimes. The guys that come up with these things, they show up at the factory and they go, what's this brand all about? What are you guys actually doing? And they'll talk to you and they'll say, oh, well, okay, I think I understand. And then they'll go away and come back with ideas. And if they're good at it, they come up with good stuff. And redefine the possible is really exactly what we're all about. Because what we're trying to do is make step changes. We're trying to say, normally that's completely impossible. You couldn't do that. But how can we do it? Can we at Meridian find a way that does something that somebody else would just give up on? And what's come out of that are the Meridian DSP loudspeakers. So we're going to get to the SE speakers in a little while, but one of the things we've been talking about, and it's on the brochures there, is 25 years of digital speaker innovation. So we're trying to say to you, we've really been at this a while and we know what we're doing. But perhaps on an evening like this, you want to hear the stories that go with it. So if you look back to 25 years ago, what was going on then? Well, there were digital filters. The concept had been invented at least in the 60s, maybe earlier. So digital filtering could be done. It's one of the things you need for a digital speaker. And in fact, I'd already done a little bit of digital filtering in the servo systems of a CD player, not with sound, but with control signals. There's something else that was really important called dither, which is a way of controlling the perception of the errors in audio systems. But this was known way back. And in fact, the concept of dither goes back to a mechanical era when it was discovered that sticking mechanical devices, if you just vibrated them a little, they would move smoothly. So that was well known. And then something else came along in I think it was 81, you could argue about the dates of when various commercial releases were done. Was it 80, was it 82? Of course, the CD came along. So there's now some digital audio that we can work with. Right? And that kind of was the state of things for quite a while. But it got more interesting in 1989. Rhonda Wilson, who was later to work at Meridian, did a PhD study at the University of Sydney and created a lab prototype of a digital speaker, of a DSP speaker. It was kind of a proof of concept. It wasn't any good because it was only 16-bit processing. It didn't have any dither. But it was very interesting just to put all the bits together and see what happened. And it crucially didn't have something that we did in 1989, which is to have a practical digital input loudspeaker. So it was the lab prototype was a set of cards in a computer frame. But what we'd done in 1989 was to take the signal from a CD player in digital form into the speaker. That sounds easy, but then you've got to work out, hang on a minute, I've got this signal going to the speaker, but what controls how loud it is? Where are the user features? The user features have to migrate to the speaker. Now you've got a pair of speakers. How do you make that work? You need a communication system. And we put all of that in place by 1989, which is the 25-year anniversary. But all of that is to say we were in place to make a step change, which came a year later. And that step change was driven by this. This is an interesting graph. This shows you the cost of transistors in CPUs. This is what's called Moore's law, which just basically says computers keep getting better and better and faster and faster. and more thermally efficient. Everything gets better about computers. As we go down this curve, suddenly, in about 1989, 1990, we start to get to the point where it's practical to do the digital signal reprocessing required in a loudspeaker to do the jobs we needed to do for audio, so that we could create some new and interesting things. And really that was one of the differences between the lab prototype that was built at the University of Sydney and what we did. It was built just a little bit too soon to be any good. But we came along and said, right, this opens the door to it. This is something called a Motorola 56001. I was amazed to find a picture of this on the internet. This is a very obscure chip, and it has a weird package. You'll never see anything like it again. It was single sourced. It had a weird chip carrier that you put it into that cost £5. The chip cost £20, and we used 2 of them. The carrier cost £5. This was a fortune. This is £50 on silicon in 1990. Ridiculous amount of money. But we said, we can do this. We can put this together. And so we did. But what was it that we did? What was the step change that we made? Step change was this. At the top, you have the standard way that people listen to music all over the world. This is a passive system. It's passive because the components that split the frequencies to go to the different drive units. You need different drive units for different frequencies. We try to do it all with one. It's very difficult. And one of my slides later on will show you how difficult. But that split occurs with components that really belong in a power station. It's after the power amplifier. It can only throw away power. It can't use power in a good way. Many disadvantages to that. What Meridian had been doing for a while was the next one down, which is called an active speaker, where we, in the analog domain, had split the frequencies before the power amplifiers. But the step change we made 25 years ago in the lab, 24 to release it, was the one at the bottom, where we put the crossover, which is the part that splits the low and high frequencies. That's what that term crossover means. We put that in the digital domain. And that meant that if you do it right, you can do it perfectly. If you do it wrong, there's lots of new ways to get it wrong, as many people have found out since. So what that allowed us to do was to create a system design where all of this componentry, the preamp, the crossover, the DAC, the power amp, all of that is built as a system where we control everything as engineers. So one of the questions you have to ask yourself when thinking about expensive audio systems, high-performance audio systems, is who would you rather put it together? Would you rather have it put together by engineers who understand every component, or would you rather that this was put together, no aspersions, but by retailers who buy different things and kind of get a good result by working at it? But you wouldn't do this in any other domain of life. Of course, some people would. Some people build kit cars. Does anyone in the room drive a kit car? Okay, that was good. No one does. Why do you drive a kit hi-fi? Right? Why wouldn't you have it built by engineers in one place with proper understanding of every component, matching them together to make the perfect system? That's what we did. But it wasn't just an exercise in completion. There are actual real advantages. This one is the first. A little bit technical, this slide. But what it basically tells you is that the passive system at the top, if you had 625 watts of power, you could get 40 volts out. Because as it goes in, the two signals are superimposed at high frequencies and low frequencies. And then there's a little bit of loss in that crossover, a little bit of power thrown away. But with the active system, with this kind of system, you only need 2 100 watt amplifiers to do the same thing. It's a massive gain in efficiency by doing that. We'll come back to that gain in efficiency and why that's important to you. Because, sometimes you think, I don't care about efficiency, I'll just buy a big amp. Big amps are cool, but they're not, trust me. Another thing that we dealt with was this. This is a diagram that shows various estimates of the power peak levels in music. Music does not have a flat response. So if you think about a certain piece of music, and listen to the different frequencies, what you find is that some are louder than others. And if you average that across all of the music in the world that you can find, you end up with these curves. And these are actually not even the average, these are the peaks of the peaks. So these are the worst cases. And you've got an IEC standard, and most of the people who've researched against the IEC standard, as you can see, have found that the IEC standard is probably wrong. And then you've got various other estimates, one by Glyn Adams, I don't know the other gentleman, and the top one is JRS, which is the founder of Meridian, Bob Stewart. But these are all pretty similar curves, different in details. I think that these guys didn't know about this peak here, which occurs on the track called Way Down Deep by Jennifer Warnes. So that's kind of the way it goes. There are a few others close to that. But if you think about that for a moment, we'll come back to that in a second. One of the problems we have is wanting more bass. So the question was, can you take any advantage of this? And I'm going to show you how to take advantage of it. If you want to get more bass, lower bass, out of a passive system, really all you can do is reduce the efficiency. Because what you have to do is, you have to make the cone heavier. And that means that up here in the mid-range, the voice, piano notes, you make it quieter. So that relative to that, when someone plays the bass, it's louder. The problem with that is, that doesn't really work, because what you have to do is just jack the power up. And if you want another octave of bass, imagine you want to be able to move your hand one octave further down the piano and have the loudspeaker still work the same. You need 16 times the power with a closed box system. And that's why I'm saying the power efficiency starts to add up here. You've got one kind of efficiency and another, because if you then look at what we do in an active speaker, we boost the bass. In the electronic domain, you say, well, it's the same, isn't it? No, it isn't. It's not the same at all. Because there's no efficiency loss in the mid-range, but we need some more power at the bottom end, don't we? No, we don't, actually. Because if you go back up a couple of diagrams and look at this, all of these curves are tailing off the bottom end. So to produce the bass that's actually on the recordings you own, you don't need that much power at the bottom end, but you do need extension. And we can do that without this 16 times the power. Just a little bit extra power and we can do it. Why does power matter? Well, one of the things we can do with this product, with a digital active loudspeaker, DSP speaker, is to protect the drive units from being damaged by the amplifiers. These components at the front, the bits that move, are relatively fragile and delicate. You can build them more robust. But they'll always be the kind of things that are musical instruments. They're fine instruments. You need to protect them. And what happens in a passive system is, usually if it's a very nice passive system, you know where the protection is? It's with your hand on the volume control. What you're doing is thinking, I've turned this up a bit too much. And you don't, it's really a bit vague. You don't know, when's too much? When's it going to blow up? The other way you can protect it is by putting something in the way of the driver, between the amplifier and the loudspeaker, or inside the loudspeaker between the back terminals and the drivers at the front. But that pretty much always, if you put a fuse or whatever, it pretty much messes the sound up. So all of those options are bad. That any of that kind of system is subject to failure. And of course, we've heard this from the other end. We used to make, we still do make power amplifiers, but you can get a scenario there where something's gone wrong with the system, and the amplifier's done nothing wrong, but it blew up the speaker because the guy turned it up too loud. This is a problem in the world. You have to be careful with that kind of system. But we have, in the DSP systems, a completely different way of handling it. Where what we can do is model what's got, this is real, this is physical, this DAC and power amp, they're making noise. But we have a complete model inside the digital signal processor of what they're doing. And when it looks like something bad's about to happen, we can go, you know what, we can protect against that. And this means that you can drive the system as loud as you like. You can just play it. You don't have to worry and think, oh, should I be doing this? And that means that we can make it play louder, we can make it play cleaner, we can just do a lot better with it. And this model, by the way, models two things. One is, it's a thermal model. How hot are these drivers getting at the front? Are they going to damage themselves by too much heat? The other thing it models is the excursion, which is how much this bass driver is moving backwards and forwards. So this driver protection is something that we can do, no one else can do. It doesn't do it to DSP speaker. And there's a lot of engineering in this, because these models have to, if they're going to work, they have to be accurate. You have to work out how to simulate everything that's going on in the real world at the right-hand side. I'll talk to you about another feature of our speakers now. This slide here is to remind me about large things. When I was in New York recently, and the weather was about like that, I decided to rent an SUV in case the weather was bad. And what I got was the most preposterous car ever. If any of you see the Range Rover outside, I was looking down on Range Rovers from this thing. It was just ridiculous. But had the snow come down, maybe I would have been glad of it. But we understand that sometimes making something large is good. Sometimes if it's a mobile phone, you want it to be small, right? So we get that sometimes large is good as small. Why would we make a large loudspeaker? Well, it goes louder, it has deeper bass, and perhaps the less obvious thing is it's more stable. So we make reasonably large loudspeakers. We don't make very large loudspeakers. Okay. This is, in fact, I love this slide. I love the ingenuity of it. This is an amateur's loudspeaker. It's a single driver loudspeaker, very purist, but perhaps a little unhinged. I love the fact that it's a Klein bottle, which is a particular geometry. But why would this not be good? Okay, is what I'm asking. Why would that not be good? I mean, it's a big speaker. It's great, isn't it? Well, the answer is it's not acceptable in the home. We've all laughed at it a little bit. There is an unhappy radiation pattern into the room, and I'll come back to that. But there are panel resonances. These panels are going to resonate like crazy. They're going to rattle. And finally, there is a problem that the bass is going to be late. And you can almost see it how why it's going to be late in this speaker, because there's such a long path through this before the bass comes back out the folded horn. But these things are universal about large loudspeakers. It's not all one-way traffic that they're good. So what do we do about that? Well, the shape of these speakers here is no accident. They are larger at the bottom where we need the volume for the bass and where it's highly domestically acceptable. As you come up to the top, they get narrower. And the shape you'll get at the top is the similar kind of size to a human head. So we call it, in the case of the DSP 8000, the head of the speaker. And part of the thinking there is that we are very used to hearing human beings. When I'm standing here, or perhaps I go out into the street, or maybe I'm in the underground, you pretty much recognize me as me. We're used to hearing me, hearing other human beings, and subtracting away the effect of what's going on around me. So it turns out that this head size width here, reasonably narrow, is a very good way to make a loudspeaker that is comfortable for humans. Going back to my slide about people at the start. It doesn't particularly help reconstruct the sound field better in the room, but it does help you to understand that sound field as a human being and to interpret it as being that musical event that you were at in the first place. It's no accident. This is an interesting slide. You may think that this is about musical taste, this slide, because there are two different things going on there, and I'll let you take your pick as which of these two Grammy winners you like. Okay? Whether you like Julian Bream or Jim Page. But I haven't put it there for that reason. There's something about the musical instruments that's worth noting in this slide. When we make a loudspeaker, we are making a musical instrument. We expect it to perform, to produce amazing quality music. We build it with the same care. But there's something structurally different about these two kinds of guitar. The one on the left is an acoustic guitar. And what's going on there is that you pluck the string, you play the string, and the whole body of the guitar moves in response to that. And that amplifies and resonates and produces a sound in the room. And it produces, if it's right, it produces a beautiful character to that sound. But the one on the left, which is a solid body guitar, Gibson Les Paul, I believe, from 1959. What happened then was, in the 50s, they started to make electric guitars. And they realized something else was something completely different was important with an electric guitar. which is that the string moves relative to the pickup, but the guitar itself should remain completely stable. It shouldn't be contributing sound into the room or receiving sound into the room. So these guitars are big, heavy, thick, solid. And this is the model that is correct for a loudspeaker. Because what you don't want is your loudspeaker to contribute character to the room or to the sound. The character needs to be in the music that was recorded. And so we make our speakers out of something very special. First of all, you'll see how thick the wall is. This is something we call Meridian. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek name. But it's a composite material made of an aluminium layer, a resin layer, and 2 layers of cold-grown plywood. The purpose of this is exactly like the solid body guitar. It's that it doesn't move. So it provides an absolutely stable platform for these diaphragms of the drivers to move, and they project the sound into the room, and not the loudspeaker. I had a very odd conversation with a journalist about this, who made his own loudspeakers at home. And he said, your speakers have no character. And I said, thank you very much. And he said, I need to have a certain resonance. I need them to have coloration. I said, not what we're aiming for. The character should come from the musician, from the music, from the enjoyment you get, not from the loudspeaker. It can have a character in terms of its appearance and your relationship with it, but not the kind of character in the sound that comes from it. It should be neutral. It should be neutral. And so, in the SE speakers, we've made a further innovation in that we are now clamping the drivers with a clamp ring, which is an even more appropriate way to make them stable within the cabinet. So these are all driving away at this same problem. And as is the separate head on the DSP 8000. Because obviously the bass, there's a lot of mechanical activity in the bass section. We don't want to transmit that into the top. And where we can afford to do so in the top model, we separate out the head. There's something else, though, about large speakers and bass. And I know many of those that are on the forum are interested in this, so we'll try and get to the bottom of it. Loudspeakers distort time, it says at the top, and they do. When a note comes into a loudspeaker, it comes out sometime later. The question is how much? And is that a constant across the spectrum of notes? Well, the first thing you note is that all speakers are high-pass filters. None of them play to DC. What we'd say in engineering terms, to direct current. And what that means is loudspeakers can't blow air across the room like a fan. It can't be continuous flow. So at some point, the frequency gets low enough that you can't push anymore. Question is, what does this mean in terms of the time of signals coming out of the speaker? And you'll see that a small speaker, the dark blue line, its high-pass filters further up in frequency. But if we look at the time, what we find is the small speaker has a small what's called group delay. It never delays sound by much. And the larger the speaker you go to, and especially if it's a ported speaker as well, creates an increase in this property called group delay. I can explain group delay more qualitatively to you. If you imagine you have a musical note, if it went on forever, where it was in time wouldn't matter. But if it starts and stops, then there's a packet of wavefronts with an end and a start. And group delay is how much is that packet delayed? How much is that note delayed? Put simply. And big speakers are worse. So that's one of the reasons that some people like small speakers. It's a reasonable affection to have. They time well. They don't have any bass, but they time well. But we can solve the problem. So this would be what would happen ideally. I talked about those wavefronts, those groups of waves. Groups of wavefronts coming out of the speaker. Ideally, they would all come out at the same time. It doesn't happen that way. What happens is that you can arrange for the mid and the high to come out about the right time. But then, whichever the lowest frequency driver is in the system, always has this problem. That the lowest bass arrives late. That's that curve of group delay going up. If you want to know more about the maths, that's quite complicated. We could do it. And what are you going to do about that? Well, you think, well, I'll just put in a filter that fixes it. The problem with that is that any such filter is unstable, which basically means a horrible clattering noise comes out of the product if you try to do it. It's acausal and unstable. But what we've worked out how to do is this. Over a limited band, we can use a particular kind of all-pass filter to delay the upper part of the woofer. We can then take the mid and the high, and instead of using filters to delay them, we can simply, in a digital speaker, actually delay them. Actually back the samples up and create a delay. And this is computationally intensive. If we were to try to carry it over the whole range, it would be computationally impossible. But what we can do with this is not have to. And that's the innovation of EVA, is to be able to do that. And so what happens, of course, is this. You get back to that perfect picture. There is a little bit of extra delay, 20 milliseconds or so, which is one of the reasons we allow you to turn it off in case it gives you a sync problem with your video when you're watching the news. But we don't expect, normally video has more delay, so we don't expect that to be an actual practical problem, but just in case we let you turn it off. But when you've got EVA turned on, the group delay is flat all the way down, and the notes all come out at the same time. What does that actually cause to happen to the sound? Well, it causes the sense of the space that you're in to be bigger and more natural. Why does that happen? Because what you perceive are audio objects that are complete. The low notes coming from a particular musical instrument and the high notes and the harmonics all arrive at the same time. That means they all appear to have come from the same place because sound is moving towards you. And when they appear to come from the sound that's come from the same place, they form an object. And that object is placed in space. And for example, any echo off the back wall of the recording studio, it arrives later and you can now hear all that. Before it was all blunged up. So you get a sense of space. You get a sense of separation. The instruments are where they're supposed to be. The echoes are where they're supposed to be. In some cases, you get improved timing. The band sounds like it's playing in time when it didn't before. Simple as that. And there is also a perceived lack of boom. That you don't get the same boom that you got before. You think, well, I like a bit of boom. No, you don't really. What you like is bass. When you've got boom, that's called overhanging bass, and it just sounds wrong. So that's what happens when we do EVA. Been asked to talk about the SE speakers, so we should introduce a couple more aspects. Another thing that, apart from EVA, that's an innovation in these speakers is high-resolution audio related. There's a bunch of logos on the screen there, all of which you might have come across as ways that people have tried to sell you stuff, music that's better. Most of them are good, there's one that's not. But 4 out of 7 Meridian's had a hand in. Okay? So we were part of DVD Audio. We produced the MLP lossless packing system. We then sold it to Dolby. We wanted to use it for Blu-ray. Became Dolby True HD, which we still support. And of course, that's then used for pure audio. And HD tracks, I think, do we still have an offer with HD tracks? Does anybody know? Yeah? If you've got the right code from Meridian, you can get a discount on HD tracks, which is another way of buying audio. So we have some involvement with all this. We're really interested in this area. And we do believe that we're doing research in this area. So we'll be making impacts in the future here. But we're making an impact now because what we've done is increase the resolution of the loudspeakers in view of the fact that these formats are available and in view of our research. Now, in order to do that, we had to double the DSP power, and the easiest way to do that was to put 2 chips on. And one of them, the second chip, is primarily there, and pretty much all it does is manage the DACs, to operate the DACs at a higher data rate. The second thing we've done is opened up the bandwidth of the analog electronics, made them operate over a wider bandwidth, so that they distort time less at high frequencies. We don't really think you're listening to 30 kilohertz sine waves to supersonic frequencies that only bats can hear. But the effect of this in the time domain is very interesting. And the final thing we've done is change the diaphragm of our the tweeter that we designed quite a while ago to a new material, to beryllium. And using the beryllium, it's a much more rigid material for its weight. And what that does is it completely kills the supersonic resonance that's associated with aluminium. An aluminium tweeter pretty much always has a resonance that's way above the audible range. And the blue curve, these are actual measurements. The blue curve shows the aluminium tweeter in the standard product that we made, we still make if you want it. You can't hear that ring as a ring because it's way beyond the audible range. But it is creating an effect in the time domain that's not so desirable. And the second curve shows you what happens with the beryllium tweeter in exactly the same scenario, that ring is gone. So it's a light, stiff material. It has a completely measurable effect. How that interacts with humans is not quite so obvious. It's all to do with what happens in the time domain, not the frequency domain. So this is what we've done with the SE speakers. Having started with our digital speaker technology that we've been developing and refining over 25 years, we've done all of these things. We've given it some more advanced speaker link features. I'm sure we could probably get into that a little bit. We have doubled the DSP power. We've given the EBA-based timing correction, group delay correction system across the range of these special edition speakers, including, and that means it's new for the 5200 speaker and new for the DSP 8000 speaker. Didn't have it before. And we've introduced a revised crossover in the 5200, which is something that might be news to our salespeople because we thought we'd done that before, but we found we hadn't. But it's there now. Okay. And that's quite interesting. Quite an interesting improvement to the product. We've also increased the data rate at which the DACs are running. We've opened up the bandwidth of the power amp, and we have changed the actual drive units, the way that we clamp the woofers to the cabinet, and specifically the diaphragm of the tweeter. So that's what we've done. But I wanted to come back to this slide because I've said a lot about technology, and I don't want you to leave with the thought that this is all about high tech. It isn't. It's about that experience of having what I call a four-dimensional portal to somewhere else. That can be a real place, it can be an imaginary place, it doesn't matter. But to be able to sit down in front of your Meridian speakers and enjoy the music that you would have done at a concert, perhaps that you did do at the concert, and have that same human-to-human communication, that emotional involvement that comes with music. That is the purpose of all of our ingenuity. With that, I'm going to hand you back to Rob. Thank you very much for your kind attention. I appreciate it.
So what we're going to do now, we're just going to open up the floor to a few questions that you've all probably got for Richard. And this could be on any subject, but obviously we're concentrating on the SE. So first hand up and I'll say.
Two questions, if I may.
Two questions.
First question is, I guess, philosophical. As an engineer, you go listen to live events and then
Yes.
you listen to them, equipment that you design. Is it cause of frustration that however hard you try, there is a gap and you're never able to pick it?
Actually, no, it's not, because I'm not trying to, is the answer. I'm aware that there is an artificiality to listening to recorded sound. In other words, if I reproduced the sound perfectly, I would think that was odd. If I brought the sound of a massive orchestra into this room and actually put that into my ears, that wouldn't make sense to me. What I want is a different experience, where everything that is important about that original event is transferred to me. It's a different thing. By the way, I put the headphones on there on the earlier slide for a reason, which is, in terms of doing what you might be suggesting now, of actually going the whole distance, binaural recording is very good. It also is, I think most of us will find fairly unsatisfactory as a listening experience. It's not what we want. We came to a loudspeaker session tonight. We probably like listening to loudspeakers. It fits in our life better. And once you've done that, once you've made the sound in your room instead of in the concert hall, it's a whole different job you're trying to do. So I don't feel frustrated right now. You had another question?
Yeah, another question was more practical question about the upgrade and how it's going to be done and so on. So presumably it will be covered anyway later. I mean, how exactly is an upgrade going to be done?
We can
so
talk about that
we'll leave
after.
that. I'll leave that a bit.
Yeah. Is there another question?
Of the different things that make up the new speaker, which was the most significant, added the most significant improvement?
In this round, the fact that we opened up the bandwidth and improved the time response of the whole HF chain. So opening up the amplifiers, changing the tweeter diaphragm, and reconfiguring how we drive the DACs. That was really all one piece of work. That's one improvement. That was the biggest one in this round. I say that way because we previously had done the EBA work on 7200, so we were just catching up with the other products. I have to say, it's a pretty fine balance overall between the EBA and the cleaner top end. So I couldn't really pick between them. Probably EBA, though, in a way, at this point, is the most significant to the sound. No one's ever done anything like that before. People have made reasonably clean speakers, but no one's done anything like EBA before.
Is the lack of EBA on a very old speaker like mine, 7Ks,
Yeah.
the reason that the bass there is often overpowering? Perhaps overpowering is too strong a word, a bit too present.
It can be, yes.
Is that what causes it? Is this delay or lack of delay in this case?
Yes, it's actually the delay that's there at the low frequencies and the lack of delay to correct it at the higher frequencies. Without hearing your system in context, can't be completely sure. So we have another technology that corrects in the frequency domain, which is our room correction that comes with the 861. And that does a fine job of tackling one effect, and I have no doubt that would work with 7000.
Yes.
I mean, so if you've done that, then you have no genuine boom in the room. So then you come down to what is the perception of boom or slowness in the bass. And at that point, I would say yes, that is the general experience. So
Because what you hear that counts at the end.
exactly,
Technology.
exactly, it does. It does, and it's a lot of it's to do with separation of sounds. So there is a piece I'm going to play, a Roberta Flack, Johnny Hathaway piece, where there is bass playing and there is a drum, and it's a very sort of pretty dead drum, bass drum, and it's not been hit very hard. It's quite a soft piece, and the separation of those two things, because in the mind we separate them so clearly in the EBA system, the boom has gone away. What we know is, intriguingly, that if you put a microphone in the room, because EBA is only operating in the time domain, and do a spectrum, you get exactly the same result done with that particular measurement technique. It has no effect on that. And I've done this many times because it amazes me. As you got the microphones out, good. Is this really doing that? I get the same spectral response, identical with EBA. Yes, you do. That's the point of it. It's saying we've got the frequency domain sorted, let's sort of time it. So yeah, I think the answer is probably yes to your question. It will improve.
That raised a question in your answer. Are there dangers in interaction between room correction and EBA on a system?
Not really. So first of all, I tried it practically. I room corrected a full EBA theatre on a New York office a couple of weeks ago, and it absolutely works. When you apply a room correction filter, what it does is apply a series of notch filters. And those notch filters are designed to reduce the reverberation time. Now, it's an imperfect technology. You would be better off with a room, a good room, without the resonant mode in the room. So it is, the clue is in the name, correction. You're correcting a defect that you could avoid by other means. But that correction itself happens over a pretty narrow band, which means you would create a spike in the group delay, but it would not be a broad sweep of the group delay that was different. And it seems to be, from our work on EBA, that it's the broad sweep that counts, right? Because noises are actually wideband, and by the time they start and end, they've been spread in frequency anyway. So we don't think it's a problem. We've used the two technologies together. I do agree that the correction that fixes your room also slightly makes the group delay slightly worse in the process. But overall, it's a better result.
Could the EBA have potentially been implemented as part of MRC itself in the processor?
In the processor. It's very difficult to do it that way. You've noticed we've taken advantage of the speaker crossover so that we can introduce a delay that is a simple, what we call pure delay. So there's no processing required. If you try to extend it to the full band, which is essentially what you're talking about if you do it in the processor, you end up with several problems. One is it becomes very computationally intensive. I mean, by that I mean many tens of times worse. Okay. That makes your processor run hard, all sorts of things. But imagine with that curve, that Moore's law curve has moved on another 10 years. Would it be possible? Yes, but then you have another problem, which is latency. As you put that many correction filters in for the EBA, the latency begins to climb to the point where it's going to get in the way. So we don't think that's a practical proposition at the moment. And the beauty of EBA is we can do it now with the things we have, with the things to hand. That was the idea. How do we need this effect? We'll invent a way of doing it that's practical. And redefining the possible is not about imagining something that could be done. It's about actually doing it. So
then can I ask you whether MRC could be implemented as part of EBA in the speaker?
What's that?
Could MRC be implemented as part of EBA in the speaker itself? Instead of having
yes, that could be done, but that's a user interface question. That you would have to build a way of connecting microphones to speakers, and you've almost got back to a surround controller when you do it. So it's how you construct it. But yes, it could be. Yeah.
As far as the mix and match of EBA capable speakers and non-EBA rears, how does that work, and does it work? And
the answer is not really. You have to be one or the other. And so, without promising too much, we have a rollout of EBA and EBA, I should say also EBA compatible software for a selected number of other products. When I say selected, they've not been selected according to our whim. They've been selected according to what processing power they've got inside.
Right.
So if you haven't got the processing power, you can't do it. So, for example, one that fell off the list but would be highly desirable is the first generation DSP 8000 before SpeakerLink. There's just no way it can be done without throwing on the speaker away. So it's not going to happen. But you can, well, actually, without upgrading to SpeakerLink. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You can upgrade the whole thing to SpeakerLink and to SE. What you can't do is put some software in and run it on that DSP.
Your relatively recent in-walls, I think the data sheet says they have EBA.
They do, yes.
So are they compatible, albeit an earlier generation, or is it exactly the same?
Yes. Okay. So there's a question about whether there are multiple versions of EBA, which comes into this. I believe there was a little bit of confusing communication, some semantics our end. But the fact is that EBA is individual to every speaker because it has to be, because it matches the driver, which also pertains to your earlier question, which is why you can't do it in the processor. You have to have a program for every speaker on the market. It's a commercial absurdity. So EBA is different in every speaker. But what happened, the crucial thing is how much the overall delay is. So we can line them all up. And so even though we craft the EBA to every speaker, they're all done to the same specification of delay, so they all work together. And even if we found a better way to do an even better EBA and gave you some new software for the in-walls, it wouldn't change the compatibility question, because the overall delay would be identical.
So they are, in today's world, the ranges, they can be used.
They can be used, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
And that was key to our thinking, not to release a product and have to come back to it.
Just on a personal note, I've got 32s as rears.
Yes.
Are they going to be included?
Did someone prompt you to do that question?
No.
Now I get to explain what I meant by EBA compatible.
you get your opportunity.
The 3200 gets EBA compatible software, which means it works in the theatre.
Yeah.
It just so happens that the way its base is equalised that we couldn't get with the processing power available an advantage of real EVA.
Yeah.
So all we do is supply some delay. When you turn the EVA on, brings the delay of that speaker into line.
It's fine, it's just that when you're using tri-field,
Yeah.
then obviously the rears are there, despite the implication of tri-field.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I just wanted to know that it was compatible,
it
I
will,
don't have to
it
disable.
will look, as far as the world concerned, as if you turned EVA on those speakers.
Then
But
it's-
at the very highest level of thinking, it's not real EVA on those because there wasn't anything useful to do.
No, that's fine.
It's a small speaker. The effect doesn't apply.
Exactly as my thoughts. Thank you.
John, how much did you have to correct the DSP 8000 base with EVA compared with, say, the ported 7200?
Less is the answer. So one of the advantages of an 8000 always over a 7200 was that the group delay was less because it was a sealed box. It's a smaller number, it's a lower curve basically. Unfortunately, that doesn't save the processing power, so it's about the same.
Richard, and just to confirm, you've talked about retrofitting EVA to some of the previous speaker models, and they don't have the twin DSP chips, so the twin chips are not necessarily required for the EVA per se. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. The EVA was something that we could do, as we did with the 7200.2, within the first chip. The second chip is totally dedicated to the high frequency component of what we're doing. And really, it's not worth having without a new tweeter, to be honest.
And is the availability of that processing power now why you perhaps didn't do the high frequency wide band kind of mods when you were the champions of DVD audio, when we were all loving the high res then? Is it, or did you just not think of it back then? Or a bit of both?
A bit of both. So, did we believe there was enough program material to make this whole area of research interesting? Had we done the research? No, none of those things. But we also didn't have a diaphragm available that we were convinced by. So it's partly to do with our supply chain being able to give us a better diaphragm, which is something we've been working on for a while, to get something that would make this kind of performance useful. Here's the point. If you change the whole electronics and leave the tweeter the same, and that's the reason you do that because it's the best tweeter you've got, you're not probably going to get anywhere. But by the time you've improved the tweeter, then you can look back into the rest of it and say, we're going to do that. But there is a research element to that high resolution audio. The things we're doing there on the research side of improving this, the things we didn't know about.
And is high res going to win? Is it going to work? Is it going to stick around? There's lots of noise about it at the moment.
Yes. There you go.
That's as much as you get.
So does that mean higher high res? I mean
okay, I'll answer that one the same way. Yes.
Because the data sheets have said forever that the speakers will be upgradable to above
190.
above 96 to 196.
And
we've always
now you're saying something different. You said would there be higher resolution? The answer to that was yes. I'm not telling you how it's going to be achieved.
You made a point about some HD tracks earlier on, which I didn't quite pick up on. I didn't
Oh, it was
HD tracks was available here, or was something?
Actually, it is.
Well,
Well,
launching a UK site in
Yeah.
April. It was supposed to be launched last
When
November.
I tried it a few weeks ago, I still couldn't get it.
Yeah, if your IP address is the UK, you have to work around for the US, but they're launching it. It's delayed on the
Okay.
website. They've got permission from the UK.
I'm right. Thank you, John, for correcting me. My perspective on this is that I have American bank accounts. I have an HD Tracks account, and certain features disappear when you call it up from the UK. So I thought that was the subset was what everyone was getting in the UK, but it's not the case.
Not yet. They've had
Okay.
months and months of delays getting it launched.
Right.
And you also mentioned something about a Meridian deal with HD Tracks. Did I?
Yeah. So
Oh,
there's a discount code that we've agreed with HD Tracks for anyone who has access to a Meridian discount code that you can enter on their website for your first purchase from that IP address.
Or just the first purchase?
From that IP address.
It's difficult.
I think we're giving them codes away for free with every DSP 8000 SC that you buy. You've got to try. So I think that's everyone's question.
It's just one more, just sort
And
of
we'll break something to it.
industry comment. You on one of your slides, you highlighted some of the different high-res formats, MLP and various others. And there's one on there that you probably didn't think too much of. Just tracking various so-called hi-fi manufacturing blogs that are out there, and there's a PCM over DSD thing running out there at the moment. Care to comment on that at all?
Yes, I guess I could. Any particular level of implementation, you go and buy a product. Right? There is no reason why the PCM product would have to be the DSD product. That's not what we're saying, because there's so much of it is in the implementation, and even it's true on the recording side. We don't support DSD as a format because it uses a single bit modulator. A single bit modulator is mathematically provable not to be properly delivered. This means that what you're doing is you're saying, at the modulator level, the very point at which you capture the signal, you are making an error that you can never fix. It doesn't matter. The great thing about DSD is that it transmits exactly from one modulator to the other. The bad thing is that the modulator is not working properly. So conceptually, we have a problem with that. We think breaking it at the very beginning is a bad idea. So if you use a single bit modulator and then bring it down to PCM, you've got the same problem. So there are thousands of PCM recordings that are no better, as it were, in this regard than DSD. But we are promoting using multi-bit modulators at the A to D and at the D to A. Simple as that.
Thanks.
So I think we'll...
That was a big one. I just noticed when you were showing the extra features that DSC has, one of them was enhanced speaker link. Is that different from a regular speaker link, or?
It is, in the sense that there are a number of extra commands that have been implemented. So the treble and bass has been implemented that way, which gives you, for example, if you power the speaker down and power it back up, it's able to then recover that information without you doing anything, without technical controls. It's very much detailed work. It's not a big set of features. It's just us kind of completing a piece of work that we started. So what we did Speaker Link to add extra features, but now we've rounded that out to cover everything that it can and basically give you a better user experience.
Can you just repeat that bit about the EBA-like software upgrade that you are going to provide for some of the products? What exactly will it do vis-a-vis the LED?
It's merely when you turn the EBA on, the Speaker Link receiver in the product notices that and applies a pure delay to the whole product, so it's kept in time with the rest. That only applies to 3200. Everything else that we do will be genuine EBA. And the only reason is that there's no problem to be solved with 3200.
So if I have an 8K speaker link, which is presumably not EBA, so it will get an upgrade and it will become EBA capable.
Which speaker do you
have? The 8000.
The 8000 speaker link, I believe that when we release the software to allow this, we'll work in that.
Okay. We were going to have a competition on who'd come the furthest tonight, but as Frank has flown in from India, we've given it to him.